My name is Diana Archer. I'm 27 years old. And last Friday night, my parents invited me home for dinner, then locked the door, sat me down in front of a marriage contract with a man I'd never met, and said, "This is happening tonight." There was an officiant in the corner of the living room. My father stood blocking the only exit. My mother looked at me the way you look at a problem you've already solved, calm, certain, finished. And you know what? She was right. As everything had already been decided, just not the way she thought. Before I go on, if this story hits something real for you, go ahead and hit like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to. And if you're listening right now, drop a comment telling me where you are and what time it is. I'm always curious who's up with me. Now let me take you back 2 weeks to the day it all started. Not the dinner, but the phone call from Aunt Denise. I should tell you who I am before all of this. Or who I was, really, because those feel like two different people now. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment 20 minutes outside Grayfield, Georgia. I work as an administrative assistant at a veterinary clinic. I pay my rent on time. I don't drink, don't smoke, don't stay out past 10 unless I'm binge-watching something on the couch with my cat. By every measure that matters to me, my life is quiet and fine. But to my mother, Lorraine Archer, quiet and fine is just another word for failure. She calls at least 3 times a week, not to ask how I'm doing, to check. Where was I Saturday? Who was I with? Why haven't I put myself out there? And always, always, always. You're 27 and still alone, Diana. Do you know what people say about that? I stopped answering most of the time. That made it worse. Last Thanksgiving, I drove the 45 minutes home because she guilt-tripped me for 3 straight days. And I walked through the front door, and before I could even set the pie down, she turned to my uncle's wife and said, "This is Diana, still single, still working at that little dog clinic." She laughed when she said it, like it was a joke everyone was in on. My father, Gerald, sat at the head of the table and said nothing. He never does. He just nodded, this slow, heavy nod, like he agreed with every word but couldn't be bothered to speak them himself. And his silence has always been louder than her voice. I was 24 the first time I thought it. Maybe loving your parents doesn't mean you have to survive everything they do to you. That year, I started keeping a notebook. I didn't know why yet. 2 Thursdays ago, I was at the clinic restocking the supply cabinet when my phone buzzed. Aunt Denise. She never calls during work hours. I stepped outside, leaned against the brick wall by the dumpsters, and answered. Diana. Her voice was shaking. Not the dramatic kind, the kind that comes from someone trying very hard to hold it together. I need you to listen to me and not say anything until I'm done. I didn't say anything. Your mother called me this afternoon. She was excited. Bragging, really. She said tomorrow night, Friday, they're having a dinner at the house. She said they're going to take care of the Diana situation. There's a man. His name is Wade Prescott. He's 38. There's an officiant coming. And there's a contract. I said her name 3 times before I believed her. Denise, 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 what do you mean, a contract? A marriage contract, baby. Pre-signed by your mother and your father. She told me Wade's family owns land out past Route 12 and your daddy owes them money. She wanted me to come and witness my niece finally doing the right thing. Denise paused. I told her I was busy. But I am not letting you walk into that house blind. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time after we hung up. My hands shook on the steering wheel. Not from fear, exactly. From the feeling of something clicking into place. All those years of phone calls and guilt and silence suddenly making a shape I could see. Denise said one more thing before she hung up. Quiet, steady, like she'd been saving it. You don't owe them your life, Diana. I had 24 hours, and this time, I wasn't going to be good. On the drive home that night, I ran every scenario I could think of. If I don't show up, Mom calls every relative in a 50-mile radius and tells them I've abandoned the family. She tells the women at her walking group I'm unstable. She reshapes the story until I'm the villain. And in Grayfield, once you're the villain, you stay the villain. A small town has a long memory and a short attention span for context. If I show up and refuse, Dad blocks the door. And I know this because he's done it before, not for a wedding, but 3 years ago, when I packed a bag and told them I was moving out. He stood in the doorway with his arms crossed and said 5 words. You walk out, don't come back. I walked anyway, but that night, there was no officiant, no stranger in a vest, no contract with my name on it. If I show up and say yes, I lose everything I've built. The apartment, the job, the 3 years of learning what silence sounds like when it's chosen, but not enforced. I pulled into my parking spot and sat in the dark for a while. The engine ticked. A neighbor's TV flickered blue through their window. And then I remembered something. The notebook. 3 years of entries. Dates, times, exact words. Every phone call where Mom told me I was embarrassing the family. Every text from Dad that was just a period. His way of saying I'd disappointed him without spelling it out. Screenshots of voicemails, timestamps. What, I'd kept it because I thought I was losing my mind. I needed proof, for myself, that what I felt was real. I didn't know it yet, but that notebook was about to become something else entirely. I pulled the notebook from my nightstand drawer. Navy blue cover, dog-eared corners. 3 years of my mother's voice pressed flat between the pages like dried flowers, except nothing about them was beautiful. I flipped through. Over 200 entries. October 14th, 2 years ago. Mom called at 11 p.m. and said if I don't come home for Christmas, she'll tell Grandma I'm living with a man. I live alone. March 3rd, last year. Dad texted, "Your mother cried all night." No context. I called back. He hung up after 10 seconds. July 19th. Mom told Aunt Patrice I got fired from the clinic. I didn't. She just doesn't consider it a real job. Entry after entry after entry. Dates, direct quotes, screenshots taped to the pages with Scotch tape. I didn't know what I'd been building, and I just knew I needed to see it outside of my own head. I called Megan Torres at 11 that night. Megan and I went to high school together. She's a paralegal now at the county attorney's office. She picked up on the second ring, which tells you everything about the kind of friend she is. I told her everything. The call from Denise, the dinner, the contract, Wade Prescott, the officiant. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that changed the next 24 hours of my life. Diana, listen to me. This isn't family drama. This is coercive control, and Georgia law has a process for this. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared, because for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't just documenting what was happening to me. I was deciding what I was going to do about it. Friday morning, I called Dr. Marsh at the clinic and told her I needed a personal day. She didn't ask questions. She never does. That's why I've stayed 3 years. By 8:30, and I was in my car, driving 30 minutes to the county courthouse. Megan met me in the lobby. She'd already pulled the forms. "I prepped everything last night," she said, handing me a clipboard. "Emergency protective order application. You fill in the narrative. I'll walk you through it." I sat at a metal table in the courthouse hallway and wrote. Not the whole notebook, just the pattern. 3 years of calls, the isolation, the guilt, the time Dad physically blocked the door. And what Denise told me was being planned for tonight. I attached photocopies of 42 notebook pages and 14 screenshots. By 10:15, a duty judge reviewed the application. By 11, she signed it. I held the paper in my hands and read the words twice. My name, my parents' names, 500 feet, effective immediately. Then Megan handed me a second form. Adult Protective Services complaint. This documents the pattern, coercive control over an extended period. It triggers a formal investigation. I signed it. She filed it electronically while I sat in the car. Then she made one more call, to dispatch. She gave them the address on Buckner Road, my parents' house, and explained that I'd be there that evening, that a protective order was in effect, and that I might need assistance. At 6:45 that evening, I pulled up to the curb outside my parents' house. The porch light was on. Mom's car in the driveway. A black truck I didn't recognize parked behind it. I turned on the voice recorder on my phone, dropped it in my purse, and took a breath. I wasn't scared to walk into that house. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scared at all. The front door was unlocked. That should have been my first clue. Mom never leaves the door unlocked. I stepped inside and the living room stopped me cold. White tablecloth over the dining table, fresh flowers in a vase I'd never seen before. Big candles, actual candles, lit along the mantel. The room smelled like gardenias and furniture polish, the way Mom only makes it smell when she wants to impress someone. This was not a family dinner. A man stood up from the couch, tall, dark sport coat over a pressed shirt, clean-shaven, somewhere around 38. He looked at me and gave a single nod, slow, measured, like we'd already agreed on something. I'd never seen him in my life. In the corner, near the bookshelf, sat a second man. Older, maybe early 60s, holding a leather folder on his lap. He wore a gray suit that didn't quite fit right. He smiled at me the way people smile at nervous brides. Aunt Denise had described every detail: the man on the couch, the officiant in the corner, even where they'd be sitting. My mother appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, beaming. "There she is! Come in, sweetheart! Everyone's been waiting!" She said it like this was a birthday party, just like I was late and everyone had been so patient. I looked at the couch, at the officiant, at the white tablecloth and the candles and the flowers. I looked at the empty chair they'd set out for me, directly across from the man I'd never met, with a pen placed neatly beside the plate. No dinner, no food at all, just a stage. And then I heard the deadbolt click behind me. I turned around. Dad was standing at the front door, arms crossed, back against the frame. He didn't say a word. And he didn't have to. Before I could sit, Mom slid a stack of papers across the table toward me. 6 pages, stapled in the corner, blue ink. I looked down. The header read, Premarital Agreement and Covenant of Union. Page 3 had 2 signatures at the bottom. Gerald T. Archer, Lorraine M. Archer, under a line that said, Parental Consent and Endorsement. My name was already typed into every blank. Diana Marie Archer, printed neatly like a form letter. It's like I was a box someone had checked. "What is this?" Mom folded her hands on the table. "Your future." "Who signed this section?" "Your father and I, because you won't do it yourself." "I've never met this person." "You're meeting him right now. Sit down." The man on the couch stepped forward. He extended his hand. I didn't take it. "I'm Wade Prescott," he said. His voice was flat, not nervous, not warm, transactional, like he was closing on a piece of property. "I think you'll find the terms very reasonable." I looked at the officiant in the corner. He shifted the leather folder on his lap. He looked everywhere except at me. I looked back at the contract. Something in the language caught my eye, a clause I almost skimmed past, but I held it. I didn't react. Not yet. "Wade's family has been very patient," Mom said, touching my arm. "Very generous." Wade checked his watch. That's when I understood something I hadn't fully grasped until that moment. He wasn't here because he wanted a wife. He was here because he was collecting on a debt, and I was the payment. I looked at the pen beside my plate, looked at the blank signature line with my name typed beneath it. I didn't pick it up. I set the contract down, stood up, chair legs scraped the floor. "I'm not signing this." Mom's smile didn't move. You haven't finished reading it." "I don't need to finish reading it. I don't agree to this." I turned toward the front door. 2 steps. 3. Dad was already there. Same posture as 3 years ago, back flat against the door, arms folded across his chest, chin down. A wall made of flannel and silence. I stopped 2 feet from him, close enough to smell the motor oil that never quite washes out of his hands. "Move, Dad." Nothing. "Dad, move." His eyes flicked over my shoulder, toward Mom, then came back to me. He didn't unfold his arms, didn't shift his weight, just stood there, solid, the way he stood in every doorway of every decision I've ever tried to make. Behind me, Mom's voice. "See? You're not going anywhere tonight, Diana." I felt the room tighten. The officiant coughed quietly. Wade sat back down on the couch, crossing one leg over the other like he had all the time in the world. 3 years ago, this exact scene made me cry. Dad in the doorway, Mom narrating my failure from behind, me caught in the middle with nowhere to go. I cried, and I pushed past him, and I left, and I didn't come back for 8 months. But tonight, there was a contract on the table. An officiant with a folder. A stranger who'd driven here to marry a woman he'd never spoken to. Tonight was different. I breathed in, turned around, walked back to the table, and sat down. Not because I'd given up. Mom's eyes lit up when she saw me sit. She thought she'd won. She hadn't. Mom sat across from me and reached for my hands. I let her take them. It took everything I had not to pull away. Diana. Her voice softened. The same tone she used when I was 12 and didn't make the volleyball team. The same tone she used when she told me my dog had to be put down. The sympathy voice. The weapon she sharpened over 27 years. I carried you for 9 months. I raised you. When I gave up everything, my figure, my social life, my career, for you. 27 years, Diana, and all I'm asking, the one thing I've ever asked, is that you let me hold my head up in this town. A tear slid down her cheek. Right on cue. I watched the officiant shift in his chair. He looked uncomfortable. Good. He should be. Wade didn't look at the tears. He looked at his watch again. The tears weren't for him. They weren't really for me either. So they were for the officiant, a performance to keep him in his seat. Mom, I said, don't mom me. Not tonight. Tonight you're going to do the right thing for once. I looked at the contract, at the pen, at the candles flickering on the mantel. Then I looked at my mother, really looked, and I recognized the pattern, the tears, then the guilt, then the command. She'd done it when I wanted to go to college out of state, when I wanted to move out, when I wanted to stop calling every day, cry, blame, control, cry, blame, control. 3 years ago, this room would have broken me. Tonight, it just confirmed every single entry in that notebook. I picked up the contract. Mom stopped crying. Her eyes went bright with anticipation. But I didn't reach for the pen. Sitting at that table, I kept asking myself, why did my mother think this would work? Did she honestly believe I'd sign a marriage contract with a stranger just because she cried? Or did she know, and simply not care? And I still think about that. What makes a parent cross that line, from wanting the best for their child to deciding they own their child's future? What do you think? Why do some parents go this far to control an adult child? Tell me in the comments. I held the contract in both hands. 6 pages. My whole life reduced to blue ink and blank signature lines. Then I turned, not to my mother, not to Wade, to the man in the corner. Excuse me. My voice was steady. I was surprised by that. May I ask you something? The officiant straightened up. Of course. When were you contacted about this ceremony, and by whom? He blinked. Mrs. Archer reached out to me last week. She said both parties had consented? A pause. He glanced at my mother. That's correct. Tonight is the first time I've learned about this marriage. It's the first time I've met Mr. Prescott, and it's the first time I've seen this contract. I held it up so he could see. My name was filled in without my knowledge. The room went quiet. Not the comfortable kind, the kind where everyone's calculating their next move. The officiant, I'd later learn his name was Dale Kenner, 62, licensed through the county, looked at my mother. His expression had changed. The polite smile was gone. Mrs. Archer, you told me both parties. She's nervous, Mom said quickly. Pre-wedding jitters. You know how young women are. I'm not nervous, I said. I'm telling you the facts. Kenner looked at the contract in my hands, then at the door where my father stood, then back at me. I leaned forward slightly, just enough. You understand that under Georgia law, a marriage ceremony conducted without voluntary consent of both adult parties is void, and the officiant who performs it can face criminal liability. I watched the color leave his face, one shade at a time. Mom laughed. Diana, stop with the dramatics. But Kenner wasn't laughing, and he wasn't sitting comfortably anymore. Something shifted in the room. I could feel it, like a current changing direction. Kenner moved to stand. Mom's hand shot out. Sit down. Her voice dropped the sweetness like a mask hitting the floor. She turned to me, and for the first time tonight, I saw the real Lorraine Archer, not the crying mother, not the gracious hostess, the controller. Diana Marie Archer, I am not asking your opinion, and I am telling you what's going to happen. From the door, Dad spoke for the first time, 2 words, heavy as concrete. Listen, to your mother. Mom turned to Kenner. You do your job. I've already paid you. Kenner stayed frozen, half standing, hand on the armrest. Wade shifted on the couch. The reasonable veneer cracked just enough for me to see the impatience underneath. I didn't drive 40 minutes for a debate. Are we doing this or not? I looked directly at him. Are you asking me? Or them? Because from where I'm sitting, you're negotiating with my parents, not with me. Wade's mouth opened, closed. He looked at Gerald. I felt my purse against my hip. Inside it, folded in an envelope, was something none of them knew about. My hand drifted to the strap, just briefly, but I pulled it back. Not yet. I checked the time. The microwave clock in the kitchen read 7:32 p.m. Mom stepped closer, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret, but her eyes were hard. 3 years you've been living on your own, and what do you have to show for it? A cheap apartment and somebody else's dogs? She said it like a fact, like she'd measured my life and found it wanting. I held her gaze, and behind that gaze, behind everything, I started counting minutes. My phone buzzed inside my purse. Once, then a second time. I didn't look at it. I didn't need to. I knew who it was. Megan had said she'd text when dispatch confirmed. Mom was still talking. And something about Wade's family, their property, how established they were. I heard every third word, the rest was static. And his mother, God rest her, would have loved you. Diana, Mom's voice sharpened. Are you listening? Every word. She leaned across the table. Her perfume, that heavy vanilla she's worn since I was a child, filled the space between us. You have two choices. You sign this contract, or you never call me Mom again. I heard it. I really heard it. And something strange happened. I felt lighter. Like she'd just unlocked a door she meant to seal shut. She'd given me permission to leave. I looked around the room one final time. Dad at the door, arms still crossed. Mom, red-faced, jaw tight. Wade on the couch, patient in the way people are patient when they're buying something they believe is already theirs. Kenner in the corner, looking like he wished he were anywhere else on earth. Under the table, and I slid my phone out just far enough to see the screen. Megan's message. Confirmed with dispatch. Send the word anytime. I typed one word with my thumb, not looking down. Muscle memory. I'd practiced it in the car. Now. I placed the phone back in my purse, looked up, and I smiled. Not the small, placating smile I'd been trained to give. Not the nervous smile that says, please don't be mad. A real one. Calm. Clear. The smile of someone who knows exactly what's about to happen. Mom noticed. But her eyes narrowed. What's funny? Nothing's funny, Mom. Not a single thing. I picked up the contract again, slowly, page by page. Since we're all here, I said, let me share what I found. Mom straightened. She thought I was coming around. I turned to page 2. Section 3. Assets of the bride. Someone listed my savings account balance. $7,412. I looked up. I've never shared that number with anyone in this room. Silence. Page 4. Section 7. Marital residence. The Prescott property on Route 12. No alternative listed. No option for independent housing. Wade uncrossed his legs. Page 5. Section 9. I read it slowly, making sure every word landed. The bride agrees to relinquish independent employment within 60 days of the marriage date. I set the page down. You want me to quit my job? Mom's face was a mask. Wade's family doesn't need you working. This isn't about what Wade's family needs, and this is about taking away my income so I can't leave. I looked at Kenner. His leather folder was closed now. His hands were folded on top of it. He was watching me the way you watch a car accident, unable to look away. I turned to Wade. Did you write this, or did my mother? Wade's jaw tightened. The terms are standard. Standard for what, exactly? No answer. I turned to my mother. You listed my bank balance. You negotiated my residence. You wrote a clause that eliminates my ability to earn money, and you signed it before I even knew it existed. I set the contract down on the table, square in the center, like an exhibit. This isn't a marriage, Mom. This is a sale. The word sat in the air between us like a lit match. I turned to my father. He hadn't moved from the door, hadn't spoken more than 2 words all night. Dad, how much do you owe the Prescotts? His chin lifted, just slightly. Yeah, that's none of your business. It's directly my business, because I'm how you're planning to pay it off. The room went dead still. Even the candles seemed to stop flickering. Wade looked at Gerald. Gerald looked at the floor. Mom's hand slammed the table. Don't you dare accuse your father. $40,000. I said it evenly. Aunt Denise told me. A land loan that went sideways, due last spring. And instead of selling something or working out a payment plan, you decided to sell me. Gerald's arms dropped to his sides. First time all night. Wade's composure finally cracked. He stood up from the couch. I don't think that's an accurate characterization. Then correct me. He didn't. Kenner rose from his chair, both hands gripping the folder. I think I need to reassess the situation here. Sit down. Mom's voice broke high and sharp, the kind of sound that carries through walls. I paid you. You're going to— Ma'am. Kenner held up one hand. If this is not a voluntary union, I cannot proceed. I will not proceed. He moved toward the door. But Gerald was still standing there, no longer blocking it with purpose, but blocking it with habit, with size, with the sheer inertia of a man who doesn't know how to step aside. Nobody's leaving yet, Gerald said. Not loud, almost tired. Kenner stopped, looked at the door, looked at Gerald, looked at me. And I watched it register on his face, the realization that he, too, was now trapped. Denise, Mom hissed under her breath. I will deal with her. Kenner took one more step toward the door. Mr. Archer, I need to leave. When it's done. Sir, it is done. I'm not performing this ceremony. Gerald didn't move. He filled that doorway the way he always has. Not with rage, but with mass. A man who believes that standing still is the same as being right. I looked at the scene from the outside of myself for a moment. 4 adults and a man blocking a door. And in a house on a quiet street. On a Friday night. If you drove past, you'd see porch light. Maybe hear nothing. That's how it works in Grayfield. Everything ugly happens behind drawn curtains. Mom pivoted. Her voice changed again. Soft, wounded, the victim track. Diana, look what you're doing. You're embarrassing us in front of Mr. Kenner, in front of Wade. Is this who you are? I almost laughed. She was worried about embarrassment in the middle of an ambush. A car pulled into the driveway next door. Headlights swept across the living room curtains. Mom's head snapped toward the window. Close the blinds, Gerald. He crossed the room and pulled the cord. The blinds clattered shut. Then he returned to the door. I checked the microwave clock again. 7:48 p.m. Dad, I said, you're physically preventing 4 people from leaving this house. Do you know what that's called? He didn't answer. It's called unlawful restraint. In Georgia, it's a misdemeanor. Unless it involves a threat of violence, then it's a felony. Dad's hands, hanging at his sides now, curled into fists. Not to hit anyone. I know my father. It was the only way he knew how to hold himself together. Somewhere outside, very faint, I thought I heard a siren. But I wasn't sure yet. I set the contract down on the table, centered it neatly between the flowers and the unlit place setting. Then I stood up, slowly. The chair barely made a sound. And I looked at my mother. I looked at my father. I looked at Wade Prescott, who'd driven 40 minutes to buy a woman with somebody else's debt. And I smiled. Not a smirk, not a grin. The kind of smile that comes when every single piece finally settles into its place and you see the whole board. Mom, Dad. My voice was so steady it didn't feel like mine. You really should have read what I filed yesterday. 3 seconds of silence, the longest 3 seconds that living room had ever held. What did you file? Mom's voice was thin. I opened my purse, pulled out 2 envelopes, cream-colored, crisp. I placed the first one on the table. This is an emergency protective order, signed this morning by a judge at the county courthouse. It prohibits both of you from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of me. Effective immediately. I placed the second envelope beside it. And this is a formal complaint filed with Adult Protective Services, documenting a years-long pattern of coercive control, emotional manipulation, and isolation. I set them down right next to the marriage contract. 3 documents on a white tablecloth, 2 of theirs, 2 of mine. The room didn't breathe. Then Mom's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A notification from the county court system. Then Dad's phone, in his back pocket, vibrated against the doorframe, and from outside, no longer faint, no longer maybe, came the sound of a siren, getting closer, then stopping, right in front of the house. Mom started screaming. Mom grabbed her phone off the counter. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to try her passcode twice. I watched her face as she read it. The notification from the court system, her name, my name, the order number, the terms. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. What is this? What did you do? Dad pulled his phone from his back pocket. Same notification. He read it the way he reads everything, slow, lips slightly moving. And I saw something I'd never seen before on Gerald Archer's face. Fear. Wade Prescott was already on his feet. I haven't signed anything. I'm not part of... I need to leave. For the first time all night, the flat, transactional voice had a crack in it. He wasn't worried about the wedding anymore. He was worried about himself. Kenner saw his opening. The moment Gerald stepped away from the door to check his phone, Kenner moved. Fast for a 62-year-old man. And he had the front door open and was through it before anyone could react. Blue and red lights pulsed through the open doorway, washing across the white tablecloth. The flowers, the contract, my mother's face, a patrol car, parked at the curb, engine running. I could hear Kenner's voice outside, rapid, talking to someone. Then footsteps on the porch. Mom looked at me. Not with anger, not yet. That would come later. Right now, it was something worse. Disbelief. The expression of someone whose script has been flipped, who wrote every line of the play and suddenly doesn't recognize the scene. Diana. Her voice cracked down the middle. You called the police? On your own parents? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The knock on the door answered for me. The officer at the door was a woman. Late 30s, dark hair pulled back, calm eyes that took in the room in about 2 seconds flat. Good evening. I'm Officer Hollins with the County Sheriff's Department. We received notification that an emergency protective order is active at this address. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. I stepped forward. I'm Diana Archer. I'm the petitioner on the protective order. I was invited here under false pretenses and was physically prevented from leaving. Hollins looked past me. The tablecloth, the candles, the marriage contract, the 2 envelopes. Her eyes moved to Gerald. Him standing 3 feet from the open door, arms at his sides. Sir, did you prevent anyone from leaving this residence tonight? This is my house, Gerald said. That's not the question I asked. Kenner's voice came from the porch behind her. Rapid, urgent. Officer, I was also prevented from leaving. I'm a licensed officiant. I was brought here under the representation that both parties consented. That is clearly not the case. Hollins nodded once. She stepped inside. As a second officer appeared behind her, younger, staying near the door. Mr. and Mrs. Archer, I'm going to need to speak with each of you separately. Sir, if you could step outside with my partner. Gerald looked at the officer, then at Mom, then, for one long moment, at me. He walked out the front door without a word. His footsteps on the porch were heavy, slow. It was the first time in my life I'd watched my father leave a doorway because someone else told him to. Hollins turned to me. Her voice dropped, not to a whisper, but to something gentler, professional warmth. You're safe now. Is there anything else you need? I shook my head. Just this, just to be believed. In Grayfield, Georgia, a police car on your street is a headline. A police car in your driveway, with the lights still going, is the front page. Mrs. Patterson from next door was already on her porch. Arms crossed over her housecoat, phone in hand, not even pretending she wasn't watching. Across the street, the Delgado's front light came on. I saw a curtain twitch at the Riley house on the corner. Mom saw it too. She was standing at the living room window, blinds still half open from when Kenner had pushed through the door. The blue and red lights painted her face in alternating colors. Her jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles in her neck. Are you happy now? She turned to me, voice low and venomous. You've destroyed this family. The whole street is watching. I didn't destroy anything, Mom. I just let people see what you're doing. She flinched. Actual flinch, like the words had weight. Outside, the second officer was talking to Wade, who had tried to slip out through the back door. I saw him through the kitchen window, standing by his truck, arms wide in a "don't look at me" gesture. I was just here as a guest, I heard him say. Mr. Archer contacted me, and I came as a courtesy, already throwing Gerald under the bus. 40 minutes of partnership dissolved in 30 seconds of self-preservation. Hollins was taking notes at the dining table. She'd placed the marriage contract in an evidence bag. It sat on the white tablecloth like a patient on a stretcher. Mom whispered from the window. Not to me. Not to anyone, really. Everyone will know, the whole town. Yes, they will. And for the first time in your life, you won't be able to control the story. Kenner gave his statement on the front porch, under the yellow glow of the light my mother always keeps on to look welcoming. He handed Hollins his phone, showing the email chain from Lorraine. Date, time, payment confirmation. She'd sent him $250 through a mobile app. Subject line, Friday ceremony, Archer/Prescott. She told me both parties were eager, Kenner said. His voice was unsteady. She said her daughter was shy but happy, that this was a family celebration. Hollins documented everything. Email timestamps. The marriage contract now sealed in plastic. Kenner's physical description of the evening, who sat where, what was said, the moment he tried to leave and was stopped. She turned to me. Ms. Archer, I have the protective order number on file. Yet your parents will be formally notified that contact with you is prohibited within the terms of the order. I handed her a printed copy of the EPO from my purse, then the APS case number written on a sticky note. Then I told her about the voice recording on my phone. I've been recording since I walked in. Hollins paused, looked at me. Not surprised exactly, more like recalibrating. That's admissible in Georgia, one-party consent state. I nodded. From the driveway, and the second officer was making notes on Gerald. Unlawful restraint, written up on the spot. Not an arrest, not tonight, but a formal record, a paper trail. Kenner turned to me before he left. His eyes were red-rimmed. Ms. Archer, I didn't know. I'm truly sorry. I believe you, I said. He walked to his car, started the engine, pulled away slowly, like he was trying not to make any more noise in a night that had already been too loud. And I stood on the porch and watched his taillights disappear. Hollins told Gerald he would be cited for unlawful restraint. A misdemeanor. Not jail, not tonight, but a record. A formal document with his name and the date and a description of what he did. I watched my father hear those words. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just stood there on the front lawn, under the pecan tree he planted the year I was born, and something in his posture changed. At the broad shoulders that had filled every doorway of my childhood seemed to narrow. The arms that had been folded like armor all night hung loose, purposeless. He looked at me through the open front door, not angry, not pleading. Something I'd never seen from him before, confused, like he was looking at someone he didn't recognize. I held his gaze. I didn't look away, didn't soften, didn't give him the small apologetic nod he'd been trained to expect from me for 27 years. Then I turned back inside. Mom was sitting at the dining table, in the chair I'd been assigned for the ceremony. The candles had burned down, wax pooled on the tablecloth. She was staring at the 2 envelopes I'd placed there, the protective order, the APS complaint, like they were something alive. This isn't over, Diana. I'll get a lawyer. Officer Hollins stepped back in. Ma'am, I'd strongly recommend you do get an attorney. For yourself. Mom looked at Hollins, then at me, then at the empty chair where Wade had been sitting. A PS will be contacting both of you within 5 business days, Hollins added, writing something on her notepad. The investigation is already open. Mom opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time in my life, Lorraine Archer didn't have a line prepared. The silence was the loudest sound I'd ever heard in that house. Wade Prescott was released after giving his statement. Hollins told him the same thing she'd told my parents. He might receive a subpoena if the investigation continued. He didn't respond, didn't look at anyone, just climbed into his black truck, started the engine, threw it into reverse, and backed down the driveway with the precision of a man who wanted to erase every second he'd spent on Buckner Road. I stood on the porch and watched the taillights shrink down the road until they disappeared past the curve by the old grain silo. But that man drove 40 minutes to this house, sat on that couch for over an hour, looked me in the eye and said, I think you'll find the terms very reasonable. He knew I'd never seen him before. He knew I hadn't consented. And he stayed anyway. Tonight, he goes home with nothing. Not the wife he'd arranged to collect. Not the $40,000 in leverage over my father. Not even his dignity. Because he'd thrown Gerald under the bus the moment the blue lights hit the driveway. Yet Kenner had already left. Now Wade. The only people remaining were my parents, 2 officers, and me. Hollins walked over. Ms. Archer, you're free to go whenever you're ready. The order is in effect. If either parent contacts you or comes within 500 feet, call dispatch immediately. I thanked her, shook her hand. One of the officers, the younger one, murmured something to his partner as he headed back to the patrol car. I caught it, just barely. First time I've seen anything like this in Grayfield. I picked up my purse from the dining table, walked past the white tablecloth, the melted candles, the empty chairs. $40,000. That was the number my parents put on my life. I walked out the front door on my own terms. The drive home was 45 minutes of silence. I didn't turn on the radio. Didn't call Megan. Didn't call Denise. Just drove, both hands on the wheel. Then headlights cutting through the dark stretch of Route 9 where the streetlights give out, and it's just you and the pines. My hands were shaking. They hadn't shaken all night. Not when Dad blocked the door, not when Mom cried, not when I pulled out the envelopes. But now, alone in the car with no one to perform calm for, my body caught up. I thought about my mother, not the woman who'd set a trap for me tonight. The other one, the one who used to braid my hair so tight it'd last 3 days. Who made mac and cheese from scratch when I had the flu? Who kept every single one of my report cards in a shoebox on the top shelf of her closet? Then I thought about that same woman, signing a contract with my name on it, listing my bank account balance, hiring an officiant, choosing a stranger, blocking the door. Both of those women are my mother. That's the part no one tells you about. The people who hurt you the worst aren't strangers. They're the ones who know exactly where you're soft because they made you that way. I pulled into my parking spot at 9:20 p.m., turned off the engine, sat in the dark for a while, listening to the tick of the cooling engine and the distant bark of someone's dog. Then I went inside, locked the door, slid down the kitchen wall to the floor, and cried. Hard and ugly and loud, the way you can only cry when no one's watching and you don't have to be strong anymore. Megan called at 11. You okay? I don't know, but I'm safe. I fell asleep on the kitchen floor that night, and when I woke up Saturday morning, my phone showed 23 missed calls. I sat on the kitchen floor with my phone and scrolled. 11 calls from Mom. I could chart her emotional arc just from the timestamps, 3 minutes apart at first, angry energy, then longer gaps, then a cluster around 2 a.m. when the crying phase would have kicked in. 4 from Dad, no voicemails. Classic Gerald, call, wait, hang up, repeat. Silence delivered in installments. 3 from relatives I barely speak to, fishing for details. 2 from Aunt Denise. I called her back first. You okay, baby? Tired, but okay. What are you hearing? Denise exhaled. It's everywhere. Mrs. Patterson told her walking group before breakfast. By noon, every woman in Grayfield who owns a pair of sneakers knew there was a police car in your mama's driveway. 1 call from Wade Prescott's number. No voicemail. Then the number was blocked. He'd deleted it from his end. 2 from numbers I didn't recognize. I returned none of them except Denise's. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Long. The kind of message she composes like a legal brief, full of blame and redirected guilt. I read the first line. You have destroyed your father and me. I cannot show my face. I hope you're satisfied. I screenshot it, added it to the evidence folder on my phone, filed it the way Megan taught me. Date, time, a content summary. It was automatic now, 3 years of practice. Denise told me one more thing before she hung up. Your mother called your Aunt Patrice this morning. Told her you've been psychologically influenced. That's the story she's going with. I wasn't surprised. Lorraine Archer doesn't lose, she rewrites. But this time, there were too many witnesses. An officer's report, a court order, a recorded confession on my phone. The story was already written. And she didn't hold the pen. The call from Adult Protective Services came the following Wednesday. A caseworker named Sandra Whitfield. Professional, warm, thorough. She told me they'd opened a formal investigation based on my complaint and the supporting documentation. Ms. Archer, your file is one of the most detailed we've received. The timeline, the screenshots, the corroborating witness statements, it all helps. She asked if I could provide the original notebook. I told her I'd already submitted 42 photocopied pages with the EPO application, but I could bring the original to her office. That would be ideal. She explained the process. Interviews with my parents, with neighbors, with anyone I listed as having witnessed the pattern. Gerald and Lorraine would be contacted by mail within 5 business days. What happens if they don't cooperate? I asked. Lack of cooperation is noted in the file, but it doesn't stop the investigation. Megan sent me an update the same day. Gerald's unlawful restraint citation had been processed. A misdemeanor, formally on record. No jail time, but it was now part of his permanent file, visible in any future background check, any future legal proceeding involving the family. Kenner, the officiant, had voluntarily submitted a written statement to APS, unprompted. He detailed everything. The email from Lorraine, the payment. At the moment he realized I hadn't consented, the moment Gerald blocked the door. He's cooperating fully, Megan said. He's scared he'll lose his license. And Wade Prescott? Silent. According to Denise, he'd told his father the deal was off. No explanation, no fight. He just shut it down. The $40,000 debt was still there. Gerald still owed the Prescotts, but the currency he'd tried to pay with, me, was off the table. Permanently. As I hung up with Sandra Whitfield and sat at my kitchen table for a long time, just breathing. The system was working. Slowly, imperfectly, bureaucratically, but working. 2 weeks after the dinner, a letter arrived at my apartment. Not from my parents, from their attorney. A formal request to vacate the emergency protective order, claiming I had grossly exaggerated a routine family disagreement. I forwarded it to Megan. Then she read it over the phone in the tone she reserves for things that are both legally weak and personally insulting. This is harassment, Diana, and it just added another exhibit to your file. 3 days later, Mom called the veterinary clinic, asked to speak with my manager. Dr. Marsh told me about it during my lunch break, her face careful and kind. Your mother called this morning. She said, and I'm quoting, "My daughter is emotionally unstable and shouldn't be trusted with responsibilities." My stomach dropped. Dr. Marsh put her hand on my arm. I told her that you're one of the most reliable people on my staff, and I told her that if she calls again, I'll document it as workplace harassment. I thanked her. I don't think she knew how much that meant. Lorraine was running out of levers to pull. The walking group had quietly stopped inviting her. Mrs. Then Patterson waved politely, but didn't linger. At the hardware store, people who used to chat with her about gardening made small talk and moved on. Grayfield is small enough that everyone knows, and polite enough that nobody says it to your face. Then Gerald called. One call, short. I didn't know it would go this far. His voice was low, rough. But you still blocked the door, Dad? Silence. Then the click of a disconnected line. I told Megan that night over coffee. As she looked at me with steady eyes. He's not sorry for what he did. He's sorry it didn't work. I wanted to argue. I couldn't. I've asked myself 100 times since that night. Did I do the right thing? Calling the police to my parents' house. Filing against my own family. There are moments, late at night usually, when I wonder if I was too harsh. If I should have just walked out and never looked back instead of bringing the law into it. But then I remember the deadbolt clicking, at the contract with my name on it. Dad's back against the door. If you were in my shoes, would you have called? Tell me in the comments. I renewed the protective order for 6 months. Then I sat at my kitchen table on a Sunday morning, opened my laptop, and wrote an email. To both of them. Short, clear, no anger, no accusation, no drama. Just the truth. Mom, Dad, I love you. I want you to know that hasn't changed, and I don't think it ever will. But I will not be in contact with either of you until 3 things happen. First, you complete a family counseling program with a licensed therapist. Second, you acknowledge, out loud, in your own words, what happened on the night of October 11th. Not a version, not a spin. What happened? Third, you respect the boundaries I've set, not because a court order requires it, but because you choose to. This isn't punishment. This is what I need in order to feel safe. I hope you'll do the work. But I'll understand if you don't. I read it twice, hit send. Mom replied within 4 hours, a 4-page email, single-spaced. She blamed Aunt Denise for poisoning me. She blamed modern culture for making daughters disrespectful. She blamed my job, my apartment, my independence. She blamed everything and everyone except the woman who'd signed a marriage contract on behalf of her adult daughter. She never once used the words, "I'm sorry." Dad didn't reply at all. I read Mom's email halfway through. Then I archived it. I didn't delete it. I might need it someday, but I didn't finish it either. There was nothing in those 4 pages I hadn't heard 1,000 times before. A boundary isn't a wall. It's a door with a lock, and the key is in their hands. They just have to be willing to pick it up. So far, they haven't reached for it. Aunt Denise and I have a new tradition now. Every Sunday morning, we meet at a diner halfway between our 2 towns, a place called Ruby's with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that's too strong and pancakes the size of your head. She always gets there first. Always orders my coffee before I sit down. Black, 1 sugar, the way she taught me to drink it when I was 16, and she said, "If you're going to be a woman in this family, you'd better learn to like things that are a little bitter." Last Sunday, she told me about her own marriage. The one Lorraine always calls the failure. She told me how her ex-husband used to open her mail, check her mileage, time her grocery trips. She told me how she stayed for 15 years because her older sister, my mother, kept telling her it was normal. "I left when I was 43, Denise said, stirring her coffee. 15 years too late. I recognized what your mother was doing to you because I lived inside a version of it." I reached across the table and held her hand. You're the first person in this family who ever told me I was allowed to say no." She squeezed back. "Took me 15 years to learn that word for myself." Megan showed up late, the way she always does, slid into the booth, and ordered a coffee. Then she pulled out her phone. A PS finalized their report. "The file is documented and archived. If anything happens in the future, any contact violation, any escalation, it'll be referenced." I nodded, sipped my coffee. Looked out the window at the parking lot, where the morning sun was just hitting the puddles from last night's rain. For the first time in a long time, Sunday felt like Sunday. I'm not telling you this story so you'll feel sorry for me. I don't need that, and honestly, it wouldn't help. I'm telling you because 3 years ago, sitting in my car in a parking lot with shaking hands, I wish someone had said what I'm about to say to you now. Setting a boundary is not betrayal. Protecting yourself is not cruelty, and keeping a record of what's happening to you, writing it down, dating it, saving the screenshots, is not paranoia. It's preparation. You may never need it, but if you do, you'll be grateful it's there. My parents aren't monsters. I need you to hear that. They're people who grew up inside a system that taught them children are property, that obedience equals love, and control equals safety. I understand where it comes from. But I can hold that understanding and still say, it was wrong. Both things are true at the same time. I love them. I love them from this side of the boundary line, where I can breathe, where I can choose, where nobody gets to sign my name without my permission. The notebook is still in my nightstand drawer. I don't open it anymore. But I know it's there, and it reminds me every single day. I wasn't crazy. I was never crazy. My name is Diana Archer. I'm 27 years old. And on a Friday night in October, for the first time in my life, I walked out of my parents' house, not because I was told to leave, but because I chose to go. That's the difference. That's everything. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. That means more than you know. If you've ever had to draw a line with someone you love, you understand how heavy that is, and how necessary. Hit like if you think Diana made the right call. Drop a comment if you've got a story of your own. I read every single one, and you'd be surprised how many people in these comments are going through the same thing right now. Subscribe and hit the bell if you want more stories like this. And in the description, there's another story I think you need to hear.